Hey everyone, welcome to another Open Cluster Management Community Meeting. It is November 11, 2022, and today Qjang is gonna go over the add-on install strategy enhancement request. So without any further delay, Qjang, please feel free to take it away. Thank you.
Okay, let me share my screen first. Is it? Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, so this one is about the install strategy of the add-on. So I think the motivation is we have the so background is we have the class management add-on and manage cluster add-on API. And when the user want to enable an add-on on a cluster, the user need to create the manage cluster add-on resource in the cluster namespace to enable it. It works fine if you have only like 3 or 5 clusters, but users still need to manually enable it, either by creating the API or using the class ADM command to enable it. But in some big clusters that you want to manage many clusters, it doesn't really convenient because you have to do it for every cluster. So previously we have a implement an interface in the add-on framework called the install strategy. So the add-on developer can set that interface saying, I want my add-on to be deployed on all the clusters, or I want my add-on to be installed on clusters with certain labels. But that it doesn't work quite well because there's many kind of different strategy the developer might want to set, like they want to somehow enable the add-on in this and that kind of clusters, not solely depends on the labels. And another bigger problem is when the developer sets the install strategy, the user basically cannot, the user of the add-on cannot change it anymore. For example, when the user say, I want to disable the add-on in a certain cluster, he cannot do that, even though he deletes the managed cluster add-on. The add-on manager of the certain add-on will still use the existing install strategy to recreate the add-on in the cluster namespace. So that's the main problem that we want to solve in this proposal. So the idea is that we could enhance the cluster management add-on API. So with that, the user has the capability to set what cluster this add-on should be automatically installed. And if the user doesn't want to install the add-on automatically, the user can reset the cluster management add-on API, and then the user can disable some add-on in their cluster. So to do that, we will enhance the API, and we need a centralized manager for the add-on that is trying to control the life cycle of the managed class on add-on API, like when should that add-on API is created and when should it be deleted. So there's some scenario like the admin user can configure this API. So the managed class add-on can be installed on every clusters or installed on certain clusters that need the add-on. So some example that we have before, like when user want to install EC Hypershift add-ons, maybe they just want to select a set of clusters which is played as a hosting clusters. It doesn't need to be installed on every cluster. Also, we should allow the users to disable the installation of a managed cluster in several clusters if the user said, I don't want to use it anymore. And we do not want the add-on developer to take care about whether this add-on should be installed in which cluster. It should be configured in a configuration API, and it should be able to be set by the user. So in general, we will create an install strategy field in the cluster management add-on API, and there's a type field. The type field is to, so I still need to change this command. So the type field is to specify what's the type of the install strategy you want. There should be two. One is manual, which means that the manager will not take care about the installation of the add-on. When it is set, the manager will not install and delete any existing managed cluster add-on in any clusters. And another one is placements. The placements is a list of the placement that should be honored by this add-on, and the add-on manager will use the placement to decide which cluster should enable the add-on. Yeah, so this part I still need to change because we decide to remove the cluster label selector. So there will be a type field and there will be a placements field. The placements field will be a list of the placement and placement graph. So in the placement graph, there is a name and namespace, which is to point to a certain placement API. And there is a template for the add-on. The template of add-on is actually the spec of the managed cluster add-on spec, because in the spec, the user still can set some field like the install namespace and what configuration should be set on the add-on. So with that, each placement can be, so this one I need to, let me see. Yeah, I think I need to change it to a pointer. I don't know whether I haven't changed it. Maybe I haven't pushed the latest PR, but this is an optional field. Like when it is not set, we will just create an empty add-on with some default field. And then alternatively, if this field is set, we will use a template to set the add-on spec. Let me check. Oh, okay. So this is an example of the API. For example, I want to install the Hello World add-on in the AWS clusters. So I will have a AWS placement and the default namespace in the default namespace, and then I change the type to the placements. So in that way, the managed cluster add-on will be created all the clusters that is in the placements decision. So when the cluster is removed from the certain with this placement, the add-on will also be disabled. It will be deleted on a certain cluster. So another example is about multiple placement. In the multiple placement, we can select multiple placement and give the different placement a different template for the add-on. Like here, if you have a AWS placement and GCP placement, and I want to, so the add-on may have a slightly different configurations between these two set of the clusters. The user can set the install strategy like this. So when you have AWS placement, you set the configuration for the AWS add-on as AWS config, and for the GCP, it will be GCP config. The next one is about how do we disable the add-on. And so in that way, we can, so here the install strategy is still placement. So to disable the add-on, we first need to disable the automatic installation. So we need to change the install strategy to manual for this add-on. And then we can then so when the install strategy is changed to manual, all the created add-on will still exist. We just do not manage it add-on by the generic add-on manager. And then the user can either delete add-on or create add-on, and add-on manager will not care about that. So I think that's pretty all the things. I think the only thing that I'm still still thinking is about whether this one should be enforced. The add-on template should be enforced on the add-on, or it is just create only. Like when there's no add-on created, we will use this add-on template to create on the certain cluster. But when the user, for example, change the config here by adding another config or change the config, which make it different from the config in the add-on template, whether we should override it back because cluster managed add-on has set it, or we just ignore it because user set it. I'm not sure which way is better yet. I think maybe we need to introduce another field in there in the placement graph here, like for example, whether we should enforce it or it just ensure the existence of this add-on. And lastly, because we need if we do like this mechanism, we need a centralized add-on manager to do that. So in the hub, we need another controller that is going to control whether an add-on is created or disabled. And we will deprecate the install strategy interface in the add-on framework. It still can be used if the user doesn't set. So if the install strategy is not set on the cluster management add-on. But if this field is set, it's better to disable that interface in the add-on framework. So the add-on manager, centralized add-on manager, will take over the installation of that. So yeah, I think that's all. Any questions, comments?
Oh, that was really good, Kyujang. I think we do need something like this for the add-on configuration for the users. But I'm a little bit worried about the delete, because you're saying that if the placement decision changes and it gets removed, then the add-on gets removed as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a lot different from the current behavior. Like right now, it's it's a more permanent once you install on the managed cluster, and that's it. And I feel like, I don't know if it's true or not, but it feels like it all depends on the decisions. If the decisions, I can't describe it. It just feels like it holds a lot of power, the placement decisions. And if the I don't know. Do you know what I mean when I say it? Maybe
Yeah, I think you
it's
mean that it's another dependency on the placement, and if there's any um issues or like
yeah, something like that. If there's a bug with the placement, or maybe someone just modified the placement without knowing that, wow, there's so much add-ons depending on it, and then all of a sudden it just deletes these add-on on the managed cluster. It can have a pretty big effect, right? Because the delete is quite a big
yeah,
is quite a big operation. That's my only concern. Just my few comment.
yeah.
I don't know if there's anything we can do about that.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, I think that something maybe similar as whether we want to override the configuration or not. I'm still thinking whether we should add a field here, like an operation field. So for this placement, we can something like never delete, or something like override, some kind of strategy here.
Yeah, I think that's definitely useful, because I imagine it will be a bigger issue if they get deleted by accident across like maybe like 1,000 clusters.
Yeah. I'm going to put comments here.
The never delete can sound like orphan. Is that maybe? I don't know.
Okay. Any other comments?
Any other comments from anyone? If there are no other comments, I would like to share my screen and talk a little bit about the Argo workflow integration.
I have one question about the cluster management add-on. Is this resource still create and update by the add-on manager, and also user can configure it?
So I think today it is created together with manifest of the add-on manager. Like so for example, if you have a Helm chart that including the add-on manager's deployment, this should also be in there, like part of the manifest. So the add-on framework will not update or change the spec of the cluster management add-on. I think mainly it should be mutated by the user or the cluster admin that want to change the configuration for a certain add-on.
Okay. So the who will create this resource?
It is created by so consider we have a bundle of the add-on manager like Helm chart. For example, in the cluster proxy, in the cluster proxy Helm chart, it has the cluster proxy add-on deployment and some permissions, and also the cluster management and add-on resource for it. So it is created, but when you install the add-on on the hub.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Quinel. That was a really good question. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. So the Argo workflow team is gonna work on the multi-cluster using the our open cluster management project. So if anyone is familiar with, if not familiar with a workflow, you just execute some steps in more like in a DAG, and then once everything's finished executing, you're reporting on the results. So these workflow are used for like I guess computation on some using some GPU nodes to do maybe some AI calculations or some workload. So currently their project is only a single cluster, and then they are looking for a multi-cluster strategy. So we've been myself, Qijang, and Quinn Hao, we've been trying to help out with the Argo workflow team to come up with a multi-cluster strategy. So everything's I have my POC demo it to them, and then it receives pretty good feedbacks. So essentially, the workflow on the hub cluster side sits dormant, so there's no workflow controller. There's no Argo workflow controller here. We have our open cluster management workflow controller that creates the manifest with the workflow payload, and then it gets over to the managed cluster, it executes, then report the status back. And then to determine, so what's missing here is in the diagram is to determine which cluster to do the workflow. It's through the placement API. So the placement API, along with the AddOn score, I think it's called the AddOn score, add-on score, add-on placement score. Yep, the add-on placement score. So we're planning to use this so that on the hub cluster side with a placement, they can determine which cluster have available computation power, so they can delegate the workflow to the cluster with the most resources available. So that's sort of what they mean by auto load balancing based on the resource availability on the remote cluster. So they'll be creating a workflow here on the hub cluster, and then based on the resource availability of the remote cluster, and then that cluster execute on the workflow and then report the results back to the hub cluster. So we're mostly focusing on the first scenario right now, the entire workflow. And then later on, they have like steps execution. That's a little bit more advanced, where inside the workflow, there's multiple steps. And then each step can go to a different cluster depending on the resource available. So the problem is when or a minor issue is when I use the placement, and then I use the add-on placement score, This when the add-on placement score changes on the hub side for example, a cluster one, the placement decision doesn't change. So the placement decision currently has a 5 minutes. I think Quinn Hao told me that it's a 5 minutes hard-coded interval. So it's only when that 5 minutes comes and then it gets updated. But as you can sort of see, that might be problematic for this type of scenario, for these workload scenarios, because maybe this workflow is actually like the first workflow, it's really heavy and it already consumes a lot of power on cluster one. And then the next workflow comes in and we sort of want it to go to cluster two, but because the placement decision hasn't been updated, so it still goes to cluster one. So it's sort of not balanced in that way. So I was just wondering, is there any way that we can work around this issue? Is it a good practice to go for each workflow? It you also create a placement, and then after the workflow is delegated down to the managed cluster, we can just delete the placement afterwards. Greenhow, Qijang, what do you guys think?
Hello, sorry.
Hello, yep, I can hear you now.
So what's the frequency of the workflow they would like to submit to?
So during I assume they're still on the POC stage, and I'm guessing during the demonstration they're going to be submitted more rapidly. Like within 1 minute, they might be submitting, let's say, 10 of them, right? But in their, like, we don't know. It depends on the user. They can fastly submit. They can not submit as many. But when they're showcasing this, it's hard to show that it's actually load balancing if they're all going towards one cluster until the time ticks around, and it's rather long time. It's 5 minutes as well.
So in the, I think in the let me check, in the API there's a valid until field which indicates how long this current score is valid, as you can see in the spec, in the add-on placement score, the valid until field. So Haojin, do you know whether we will requeue based on this? What I kind of forgot what happens if the user set a very short valid until time, and that time has passed, what will happen?
Currently, if the valid until is expired, this cluster will have a 0 score. We want to reschedule based on this. 5 minutes is a hard code in our sync function.
Okay.
So it just doesn't use the score at all once the time is up?
Yeah. As I remember, it's that if the cluster is valid until it's paired, it will have a score 0.
Score, but they mean we won't change the decision in this case. Like we just keep the current decision.
Because when it expired, we want a reschedule, so that we want to discover this valid until it's expired.
I see.
Another way maybe is they can make some changes on the placement, so it will trigger a reschedule.
I don't know if we need to make that change yet, because I agree with your initial analysis that scalability is an issue. I was mostly wondering if it's a good practice to just create a placement, get the decision, and then delete it afterwards. Like, is it a concern if we do something like that, or?
No. So what you so in their case, it's more like they will create a 10 workflow, right? Like
Yep.
they will create 10 workflow and using the same placement, but the part probably they can use 10 workflow with each one with a certain placement. So
Yep.
so who will create the placement? Like the OCM workflow controller, or
No, I think, yeah, that's a good question. Because then they need to create the placement. They'll create the placement. But currently they just need to create it once, sort of. Like, they just say these are the cluster set. I mean, these are the cluster in this cluster set that I want to select. But if it goes by what I'm proposing, they will have to create one on their own each time. And it might be quite,
yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, is there any, so what if the OCM workflow controller create a placement per workflow, will there be any issue there? I think you will still need to watch the workflow, and then when there's a new workflow, you can create a placement. Check the, is that even possible?
But I don't know the specs of the placement, right? Because
Oh, I see.
yeah, so it's almost like they need to create, yeah, because usually the spec should be the same. Like, in this case, it should be the same. They're just going to these group of clusters, these sets of clusters. But yeah, so each time, yeah.
So all the workflow need will share the same placement spec.
They can
right?
share, they cannot share. They currently have a pointer. I think
Okay.
I put it in the annotation or somewhere where it points to a placement, so they don't have to share the same placement. It's nice that they share placements, because then that's one less CR they have to create. And also, to deal with the deletion, I guess once I get the decision, once I have the decision, and then I generate the manifest work into the clusters that is responsible for it, then I can automatically delete the placement afterwards, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll do something like that then. Okay. As a sort of like a workaround. But I still think it's a little bit strange though to,
Yeah.
to have the score being updated but not able to, not properly reflected in the decision until minutes later.
Yeah, we need to think about that again, because previously the placement is, we were thinking the workload is more like something like an application that you don't want to change the decision frequently when you deploy the workload.
I see.
So we commonly in the current design, we always want to try to stabilize the decision if one is done and just change if it is necessary. But this is a different workflow. I think it more like they want the decision to be changed in response of a matrix change immediately, and that I think
Yeah,
need some different. I don't know. I think we need some further discussion. Maybe I will discuss with Haoqiang that also later.
yeah, because I even in this comment, right? If you can look at the PlaceWork API comment, like the community is very interested in the distribution strategy, and I think Ivan also mentioned that we might want to distribute object on to multiple clusters. So so I think this distribution pod, but maybe it's not workload related. Maybe it's a pod or something. Maybe this is too specific of a use case where these workload just live temporary, and then it can be get rid of. Anyways, I think so you think the sort of creating the placement and then delete it later is good enough strategy for now, right? Just to work around this issue.
I don't know whether it works because, yeah, I think it should work. Like you create a workflow and create a placement, then delete a placement for another workflow, create the same placement again. That, yeah, I think that could be done with as a workaround. If you.
Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. You're saying have a placement that it points to, but instead of consuming that decision, that reference placement decision, I create a same placement, like a temporary one, generate the decision, and then once I get the decision, because this one will be more up to date because it's freshly created, and then I deleted it, and now all the workflow is still on surface. It looks like it's pointing at the same placement, but the decision evaluation is actually coming from a more up to date source. Okay, I think I sort of get it. It might be harder to debug though. It's like why did it go to but the placement is now gone afterwards. Anyways,
Oh
okay.
yeah, I think, yeah, maybe you can. I see. So maybe you can just delete the decision itself to make it evaluate. I think that's your previous think about the workaround, right?
You're saying just delete the decision and then it'll
Yeah.
evaluate. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, so if I delete the let me go back. So if this add-on placement score is updated, and then if I delete the decision, then the decision coming back, it will analyze it and then come up with the new score. I mean the new list.
Yes,
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Queen Hao, is that true? I think you work on this part.
I never tried that. Maybe it work.
Okay, I'll try that then. Thank you guys. I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Okay, anyone have any other comments in the last 3 minutes? If not, thank you everyone for joining. Take care. Have a nice day. Bye.